Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. We welcome to the online teaching academy Ekalaiva. Standard 11, subject biology. In the last part, we have studied about the vegetative morphology, in which we have studied about root, stem and leaves. Now, we are going to study about reproductive morphology. Reproductive morphology is the study of external form and features of flower, fruit and seed. Now, when we talk about reproductive morphology, the important form or the structure of reproductive morphology is a flower. A flower is nothing but a modified shoot, wherein the shoot apical meristem changes to floral meristem. You all know that the stem is having at the tip, here we find an apical meristem, the one which helps in elongation of the stem. So, a flower is a modified shoot, wherein the shoot apical meristem changes to the floral meristem. So, the internodes, we know that this is the node and this is the node, and the successive distance between the nodes is what we call it as an internode. Here, the internodes do not elongate and the axis gets condensed, and the apex produces different kind of floral appendages instead of the leaves at the successive nodes. So, flower is nothing but a modified shoot, and the arrangement of flowers on the floral axis is only termed as inflorescence. So, when you say that this is the axis on which you will find that the flowers are being born, and this axis is only what we call it as peduncle, we will call it as. Peduncle. So, you will find the floral axis on which the flowers are born, you call it as inflorescence. Now, depending on, so here if you find, this is an inflorescence and this is another kind of an inflorescence. Now, we will see that if you find the inflorescence where they are born, based on the position, you will find the inflorescence may be terminal. The inflorescence may be terminal or it may be axillary. You all know what is axil. If you say this is a stem, from the node the lateral branch arises, and this is what we call it as an axil. If the flower is born here, you call it as axillary. And if the inflorescence is developed directly from a woody trunk, if you say this is a trunk, on the trunk if you find that the inflorescence is being born, then you will call it as cauliflorous. Example you will find in a jackfruit. So, based on the position, the inflorescence may be terminal, axillary or cauliflorous. Now, depending on the position, that is the arrangement of the floral axis, the inflorescence may be of 4 different types. You call it as racemose, cymose inflorescence, and combination of racemose and cymose we will call it as a mixed inflorescence, and the 4th type of inflorescence is called as special inflorescence. Now, we will look into the first kind of inflorescence, what we call it as racemose. So, this here you will find that this is the main axis on which the flowers are being born laterally, and this axis is showing an unlimited growth or indefinite growth, and such kind of inflorescence you call it as racemose inflorescence. Here the main axis is of unlimited growth, and you will find that the flowers are arranged in acropetal succession. You can see that these are the older flowers and these are the younger flowers. So here you will find that the flowers are arranged in acropetal succession, and when you see that the opening of the flowers, you will find that the opening is there from the periphery to the center. So you call such kind of opening as centripetal succession, you will call it as. So this kind of inflorescence where the main axis is having an unlimited growth, the flowers are arranged in an acropetal succession. The opening of the flowers are there from the periphery to the center, what you call it as centripetal, and the oldest flowers are there at the base and the younger flowers are there at the top. You call such kind of inflorescence as racemose inflorescence. And in cymose inflorescence, you will find that this main axis is having a limited growth because the flower is there at the tip here, so there is no further growth. So it is of limited growth, and the flowers are arranged in a basipetal succession. That is, this is the older flower and these are the younger flowers. And the opening of the flower, because the older flower is at the center and the younger flowers are at the periphery, you will find that the opening of flowers will take place from the center to the periphery. You call that as centrifugal, you will call it as. So the oldest flower are at the top of the inflorescence axis. So these are the differences between a racemose and cymose inflorescence. And this racemose inflorescence is further studied under three different main categories, where the main axis, this main axis what you were talking about, whether it may be elongated, the main axis elongated, or the main axis may be shortened, and the third one is the main axis flattened. So you will find the racemose inflorescence under three subheadings: main axis elongated, main axis shortened, and main axis flattened. Now in the main axis elongated, here if you see, this is the main axis. Here you are talking about, this is simple raceme which you will find in mustard and radish. You will find these flowers are having a stalk, and this is what we call it as a pedicel. The stalk of the flower is called as a pedicel. So here you will find these are pedicellate flowers, and here this is what we call it as a simple raceme. Here you can find that this is the main axis on which the flowers are being borne, but these flowers do not have pedicel, so you call them as sessile flowers. And this is an example of spike. And in paddy you will find, the spike. These are the spikes of the branch. You call them as spikelets, you will call it as. And if this spike is pendulous, you can find this, you can see that the spike has been hanging here, and this is called as catkin, which you will find in pepper, okay, Piper nigrum. So you will find that the spike which is pendulous, you will call it as catkin. So you will find the pendulous spike. And here this is what we call it as a spadix. Here you will find the bract which is there. This is the bract. What you call it as, the bract is brightly colored. What you call it as a spathe. And you will find the inflorescence here. That is, the flowers are being arranged here. That is, the unisexual flowers are arranged inside this brightly colored bract, what we call it as a spathe. This kind of inflorescence is called as spadix. Then, and this is what we call it as a compound raceme, is called as a panicle. You will find the main axis here, again you will find the branch here, and then it arises. So you call this as a branch raceme. What you call it as panicle, you will call it as. So a panicle is nothing but a branch raceme which you will find in Mangifera. Mangifera is mango, you will find. Now if the main axis is shortened, you will find this axis has been shortened, and here we are going to see some examples. This is what we call it as a corymb. You will find this, it's an inflorescence with shorter pedicellate flowers at the top. You will find these are the shorter pedicels at the top which are there, and you will find these are the longest pedicels which are there at the bottom. And how do these flowers appear? These flowers will appear either at the same line or same level, or you will find in the form of a convex or flat top racemose inflorescence. And this is what we call it as corymb, which you will find in Caesalpinia. You can find these flowers which have been arranged here. Here you will find the longer pedicellate flowers which are there at the bottom, and the shorter pedicellate flowers which are there at the top. And this what you call it as a compound corymb, which you can find in, you are very familiar with this. It is nothing but what? A cauliflower. In cauliflower you will find this kind of inflorescence, which you call it as a compound corymb. Now, when it comes to the other one, what you call it as an umbel, you will call it as. And this is an umbel. What is an umbel? The inflorescence where you will find this is the axis. From at a point you will find the branches which arise. This you call it as an umbel. You will find in Allium cepa. And this is compound umbel, which you will find in Dacus carota, that is the carrot. So here you will find from the axis, you will find here an umbel is an inflorescence with an indeterminate central axis and pedicellate flowers from a common point. So you will find from a common point these pedicellate flowers are being born, and that is what you will find in Allium cepa, that is the onion. And this Dacus carota is where you find a compound umbel. It is a branched umbel, and every smaller unit is called as umbellule. So this you will find, these are the small units which you will find. And the third form, what we were talking about, the main axis flattened. In this we are going to see an inflorescence, what we call it as a head or capitulum, you will call it as. And if you find this, you all can remember the Mimosa pudica, the touch me not plant, which will have this kind of inflorescence. Or you will find in sunflower, you will find this kind of inflorescence. And this inflorescence is what we call it as a head inflorescence, we will call it as. In this head, you will find that there are two different kinds of florets which are there. What you call them as ray florets and tubular florets, you will call them as. So you will find the central flowers which are there, and then you will find the ray florets which are there at the periphery. So if you see sunflower or tridax, you can find two different forms of florets which you can find. If the head is having only one kind of a floret, then you call that head as a homogamous head, you will call it as. If the head is having two different forms, then you call it as heterogamous head, you will call it as. In heterogamous head, you will find the disc florets, the florets which are there at the center of the head, which are tubular, they are called as the disc florets. And the florets which are there at the margin of the head, here you will find they are called as ligulate, and these florets are called as ray florets, you will call it as. So if the head inflorescence, if it has two different kinds of florets, one is disc florets and the other one as a ray floret, then you will call it as heterogamous, which you will find in Helianthus, that is a sunflower, and tridax. So the racemose can be studied under three: main axis elongated, main axis shortened, and main axis flattened. Now, when we come to the other type of an inflorescence, what we call it as a cymose inflorescence. We already said that the cymose inflorescence is what? Where you will find that the axis gets, the main axis is ending with a flower. You call it as a cymose inflorescence. In this we are going to see about, this is a simple cyme, and you are very familiar with this flower. It is nothing but the hibiscus rosa sinensis. And here this is a simple cyme, and it is only single flower which is there. You call it as a solitary, and this flower is being born at the axil, so you call it as axillary, you will call it as. If the flower is there at this point, you call it as axillary. So in hibiscus you will find it is an axillary and simple cyme. And in this picture you can see that this is what you call it as monocacial cyme, you will call it as. Here you will find that this is the main axis. The flower is there at the top here. From the bract of this, only at one side, at one point, only from one bract you will find that the floral axis is there. Again it is been branched here. This you call it as monocacial helicoid, you will call it as. What is monocacial? So this is a picture of a monocacial cyme. In this monocacial cyme, the main axis ends with a flower. So this is the main axis which is ending with a flower. And from these two lateral bracts, you say that this is the bract from which the flower is being arised or it is born. And here, if from two lateral bracts, only one branch grows further. You don't find on the either side, only on one side you will find the growth is there. And such kind you call it as a monocacial cyme. And these two forms are there. One what you call it as helicoid and the other one we call it as a scorpioid. So in helicoid cyme what you will find, the axis develops on only one side and forms a coil structure. So you will find here and then it branches, so you call it as helicoid, you will call it as. But whereas in scorpioid, you will find that the main axis develops on alternate sides. So you say that this is the axis, the main axis which ends with a flower, and you will find this is the one, the branch, and again. So it is an alternate side when it develops, you call it as a scorpioid, you will call it as. And simple dicacium. A simple dicacium is nothing but an example of jasmine. You all would have seen this. The main axis is ending with a flower, terminal flower, and this two lateral buds which gives. So how many are there at one central part? This is the cymose unit, you call it as. In the cymose unit you will find 3 flowers are there. Each cymose unit consists of 3 flowers. This you call it as simple dicacium, you will call it as, which we will see in jasmine. And here you will find that the compound dicacium. What is compound dicacium? If it is been branched, you call it as a compound dicacium. You will find the main axis is ending with a flower here, and then you will find a branch here. And this is a cymose unit. You will find 3 here, 3 here, and here. So it is 7 you will find in this unit. This you call it as a compound dicacium. If it is still further branched, then you call it as a polycacial cyme. So this is a polycacial cyme. You will find in nerium, where you will find the main axis ended with a flower, and then you will find this is the branch from the 2 lateral bracts on the either side. You will find the branch here. This ends with a flower, and then you will find this. You call it as a polycacial cyme, which you will find in nerium. Now, when it comes to the mixed inflorescence, where do you find this mixed inflorescence? We said the mixed inflorescence is nothing but it is the inflorescence which will have a racemose as well as a cymose inflorescence. Here you will find in this picture. Now this is the racemose inflorescence. The main axis is unlimited in growth, and then here you will find this is a cymose pattern you will find. So you will find this is the axis on which the flower is being born, and the 2 lateral bracts again. So here you will find 3 in this unit. And this kind of inflorescence is only what you call it as racemose, mixed inflorescence you will call it as. And one example is what you call it as thyrosis. The best example is you can find in osmium, that is the tulsi. You will find that this is the main axis, and here from this you will find this is the racemose inflorescence and this is cymose. A combination of racemose and cymose, you call it as a mixed inflorescence. Example is thyrosis. It is what you call it as a raceme of cymes. And the second example, which we call it as verticillaster, this is only an example. You can see this is a one form of a thyrosis inflorescence. And then when we look into the special type of inflorescence, and in this special type of inflorescence only one example we are going to look into. This is the characteristic feature of a Euphobiaceae family. What we call it as cyathium, you will call it as. So this cyathium It consists of what? Unisexual flowers. In this picture you can see, this is a picture of a Cyathium inflorescence, where you will find the flowers are there here, the unisexual flowers are there here, and this unisexual flowers are being covered by, this is what we call it as involucre, you will call it as involucre, you will call it as. So you will find the involucre which is there and the unisexual flowers are there. And these are the male flowers, and you will find a long pedicellate flower, this is the female flower. So here if you say that it is organized in a scorpioid manner, you will find female flower is solitary, centrally located, and you will find this is a long pedicel which is there, and all the male flowers are there here. And this is what we call it as Cyathium. It is a special type of inflorescence we will see in Euphorbiaceae family. And you will find nectar also in this. The nectar is present in this involucre, so that the insects are being attracted towards this flower for pollination. And the other examples are Hypanthodium, which you will see in ficus, the banyan and the peepal. This is a picture of Hypanthodium, and this is Synanthium, which you call it as, you will find in Dorsetinia. So these are the examples of some of the inflorescence like racemose, cymose, mixed inflorescence, and special type of inflorescence. In the next class we will study about flower. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.